Welcome to the AI Lab Unfiltered podcast, where we take a deep dive into everything AI. I am Drew Veach from BizStream. I'm joined by Mr. Pete Tarrant from New Wave.
Hello.
We have a great show today, but before we get into the show, I guess let's do our thanks. Big shout out to Studio Jefferson. We're in beautiful Studio Jefferson, just on the outside of Grand Rapids here. It's just a great place to have a podcast, and to power your podcast, Think Tank Thought Leadership. That's who runs us. That's who handles all of our production, all of our editing, our engineering, the social. I mean, they've helped us even just put together how do we even format a podcast. It's a turnkey solution. We wouldn't be here without them. Big shout out to Think Tank Thought Leadership. If you're looking to put a podcast together, don't think. Think Tank Thought Leadership. I thought of that in the car on the way here. Huh?
Yeah, that was awesome.
That's a dad joke. All right. So today's show, really good show. We're kicking off a AI in manufacturing mini-series. It's something that Pete and I have been passionate about. We talked to a lot of area companies about AI, and we thought, let's put together more of a focused series of podcast episodes that we want to talk about how manufacturing could use AI, where manufacturing is using AI, and kind of everything in between. It's a growing need, and it's a different twist on how they need to get into the game or how they are into the game versus a lot of other industries. There's a lot of challenges that come with manufacturing. And to kick that off with us, we have Mr. Doug Landman from The Right Place. Doug, welcome.
Morning. Thank you.
So you are the manufacturing solution specialist at The Right. You work with a lot of manufacturers at The Right Place. Can you just kind of set the stage of what The Right Place does?
Sure. Right Place itself is the West Michigan's economic development group. Our role is to help businesses, first of all, get themselves more efficient and more effective, but also to attract business to come into the West Michigan area for a lot of different reasons. We touch base with everybody, including funders, including venture capitalists, including banks, et cetera. Specifically, my group is a contracted group that represents the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center in West Michigan. For 13 counties, we're the representative of the MMTC. The MMTC is charged by the U.S. Department of Commerce to go out and help small to mid-sized businesses compete on a global level, to make sure that they're able to implement advanced manufacturing technology, to make sure that they're properly sized, operating efficiently, and actually able to swing well above their weight class with regards to being competitive in the marketplace.
Nice.
So that's specifically my role. Is my team's role is to go out to a 13 county area, talk with manufacturers, and help specifically small to mid-sized manufacturers understand what new technology is out there, how to implement it, identify other organizations that can help them operate more efficiently and effectively, and how to represent themselves out in the marketplace to attract that business coming in.
Nice. And that's one thing we wanted to really focus on with you being here is some of those challenges of the small and mid-sized businesses and how they're going to adopt that new tech, because that is I wouldn't say it's a red flag, but they know, a lot of companies know they have to get into AI, and AI is helpful. Nobody knows how to use it yet. Nobody has that roadmap yet, if you will. So talking about some of those challenges, what are you seeing out there that is kind of the biggest challenges that are being faced right now?
I think a lot of what you just described is exactly what they're facing. They see this light out there. There's this vision. Everyone's telling these small businesses, you're going to have to get AI. You have to compete. You have to adopt in order to survive, honestly. And there are no prescriptive steps that they need to take yet. So they really are just trying to understand, first of all, what does this mean? When they start to get these descriptions, they're usually getting these descriptions from big companies that have already implemented some solutions with AI. And they're talking about enterprise-wide type solutions. And these are really daunting considerations that these small manufacturers are trying to contend with. I have 40-year-old machines that don't have any sort of data that they're putting out. How am I possibly going to capture data to analyze it and use AI and the LMMs or LLMs to analyze and optimize its production when it's not putting any data out. These are questions that we hear all the time. And then how am I going to fund it? And how am I possibly going to be able to get somebody in here that can understand and manipulate the data along with the machines? It's very similar, I'm of a certain age, and it's very similar, honestly, to what a lot of small companies were facing back in the 80s and 90s with regards to quality control programs and quality implementations. ROIs were not very well defined. It was nebulous about where some of the benefits were coming from, and it involved a big change from the entire company's culture to be able to address and adopt this perspective about quality improvement and making sure that we're all kicking in to do things efficiently and that we're quantifying all of our processes. And just like that, we're starting to see some pathways where there are some big leaders out there that are starting to be able to define what some of the returns of AI are. And with that, suddenly people can start to visualize what AI could potentially bring to their business in terms of improvement.
You can start to identify then, like, how much are you willing to invest to get that return? Because you can't quantify the return. How do you know how much you're willing to invest in it, right?
Exactly. And so that involves kind of a leap of faith, honestly, from the company's executives about, okay, I believe that there will be some good that comes out of it, even though we don't necessarily know precisely where the benefit is going to be measured on it, at least at first. So that's some of the things that we're doing are trying to shift that mindset away from this huge, big, undefined monster that I have to say yes to and I have to commit everything to, and I'm betting my entire company on this one project.
Yeah.
If I take that perspective, suddenly I get paralyzed because I have to make the right decision. And what is the right decision? And I'm trying to get all of this information from all these potential sources and potential helpers, and it's overwhelming. So oftentimes I use the mantra that perfection is the enemy of progress. And that's certainly the case with AI adoption, is if I wait until the absolute right best time to implement it and think that I have to implement an enterprise-wide solution.
Right. It's never going to implement.
Everybody's going to pass me.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we do in going out to these small manufacturers is talk about more about the problems that they're facing and what are we trying to solve. Focus more on the solution than the technology, the specific investment that we're making. What don't you do well, and why do you say that you don't do well, and what would doing well look like? How would you measure that, and what would that involve? Suddenly, the solution starts to percolate to the top where, okay, this is the process that we need to look at. We've had unscheduled downtime on this particular machine, and it's cost us X amount of dollars in terms of rework or in terms of shipping delays, et cetera. Okay, well, let's focus on this machine. What's the nature of that downtime? If it's, and so suddenly we start to identify some technology that could identify or predict some of that downtime. And if we were able to get some sensors and install sensors in that can then be, data could then be captured, and then we could analyze that data and start to predict before that's going to happen, suddenly we come out way ahead. There's some costs that we've been avoiding with implementing that type of solution. And then we start to see the mindset take hold where, okay, I'm going to take the savings that I just generated by making this small little modular improvement. What else? What's next? And suddenly, many more people within the company are starting to think about these process improvements. We're starting to talk the language. We're starting to understand what condition our data is, which is also a huge barrier to being able to implement AI. Disparate data sources or no data sources. But once we start understanding where that data is coming from, then we can start talking intelligently to people that can help us implement much broader solutions.
And you mentioned a couple of key things that Pete and I are always talking to people about is, number one, in a lot of companies that I talk, and I know you're the same way because we talk about this all the time. When we come into companies, it's always, hey, I want to use AI. Where do I start? I want to implement something with AI. Well, that's such a broad term. It's just like you said, don't worry about the technology. Don't do. I always say, don't use AI for AI's sake. What is the actual need you're trying to solve? It still comes down to what's the business need that you have, and what are we trying to solve? Let's start there. Let's identify that. Let's unpack that. Let's find that. Then we can implement whatever technology comes in there. Because we've implemented stuff where it's like, you don't need AI. You need a simple code solution that's, a simple software solution, nothing to do with AI.
Absolutely. And honestly, some of that conversation that we have with these small to mid-sized manufacturers, we start talking about specific processes that seem to be way out of whack. And the first 2 or 3 solutions that we have to try to fix them have nothing to do with AI. It literally is just process identification, definition, and management. Oh, maybe we should look at that.
Which not to say it still modernizes your tech stack, and it modernizes your company, regardless if it's AI or not, because it's still like you said, it then drills down to what's the actual data we're using at that point, and how are we implementing that into a solution.
Exactly. And just to take that theme and carry it on a little bit, when a small company talks to a vendor, for example, that might be able to help with a broader AI solution, oftentimes that conversation is very technology focused. It's like, here's, and we're having a promotion on this particular software package to help you with this. It is very solution focused, not problem focused. And so that also is very daunting, where now I'm having to compare these 2 different enterprise-wide solutions, and suddenly it's horribly complicated and worrisome. But again, our mantra with these manufacturers is focus again on the problem that you're trying to fix. Think about what your company will look like as this unnamed solution is implemented. How will you be working better? And then let's backpedal into what that process will look like to get you there.
And we see a lot with the tool sets that we see, and every day there's like 1,000 more companies that are building something with AI. A lot of them, I think the majority is a solution looking for a problem more so than we're trying to solve this problem with this solution. So you're right. It's overwhelming of what's out there, and you can get lost in the weeds of, well, I'm trying to find that right solution. Well, again, what was your issue that you're trying to solve in the beginning? And does it make sense to implement that solution? Does it hit all the boxes that you need?
Right. A lot of the people that are spouting about how important AI is, they have a stake in the game. They have something that they're trying to provide, some solution they're trying to provide, something that they're trying to sell. That's why it's important for these smaller companies to also find information from kind of neutral sources. Talk to the Switzerland of AI implementation. They don't have a stake in the game other than the fact that they're just trying to help. Our group is certainly one of those. We're funded by the Federal Department of Commerce, but we're also funded by the state. The Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Automation Alley has helped with a variety of programs, honestly, to help with the AI implementation. But again, our goal, though, is to try to actually help the business succeed in bringing in our tools in our solution kit across the gamut of all the different solutions. So we're not necessarily bound specifically to come in and talk only about AI.
Yeah.
But we're also, through the Right Place, we also have the Right Place Manufacturers Council. That's a group of manufacturers in the West Michigan area that have gotten together and decided that there is a great benefit to the local economy if manufacturers have a forum with which they can share best practices, learn from each other, hear about things that are working in one plant. In some cases, they may even be competitive companies, but the sharing of best practices, helping raise the level of the employees in the West Michigan area, actually benefits everybody. It not only helps make sure that all these companies get access to well-trained employees that can actually make a huge difference, and that there's a growing source of those types of employees, but it also helps attract these businesses coming into the West Michigan area. So the more conversant that these manufacturers are in advanced manufacturing capabilities, and they're talking that language, and they're all raising that bar for each other, the more likely these companies are going to be to come into the West Michigan area. Right now, it's particularly important because of the tariff situation, the uncertainty that's going on. We're seeing a lot of for example, European companies that are very interested in expanding their production capabilities within the U.S. They're looking at areas to land in.
Yeah.
And so we have a very compelling story with groups like our Manufacturers Council to say, look, these are the things that we're doing. These are the initiatives that we're putting in place. A great example of the cooperation that's going on in West Michigan right now about trying to build that literacy for AI among small manufacturers is a solution or a workshop that was put on last week at Tech Week.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm throwing your timeline off now.
No,
we
that's
recorded
fine.
this now.
That's fine. I know where you're going with it because we were there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. The Manufacturers Council partnered with GRCC, Grand Rapids Community College, to put on a hands-on workshop for manufacturers,
Yep.
kind of introducing them to AI. There were 50 or so people, including yourselves, sitting there at computers and working through actual hands-on exercises that were put together by the GRCC IT group department, I should say. Really, helping people understand, okay, this is what a data set looks like. This is, you're going to be accessing this information from the data lake that we put together. It's real data from machines. And we're asking you to essentially perform these steps to allow an LLM to analyze what's going on. And for example, one of the exercises was, we need you to pull this data set in, and we need it to predict which of these machines is going to go down first, most likely, based on these criteria. And suddenly these people are throwing data around. You can see, people of my age starting to get excited because suddenly they're starting to see what this actually is. Oh, okay, I see what's going on. I see the type of questions that we can get answered using this type of technology. That type of baseline education is super important to be able to get anybody at any level within these companies to start putting something that they can actually understand in their heads about what AI is. It's no longer this big amorphous, undefined concept. It's like, oh, it's steps to do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And this looks like a lot of stuff I see on my day-to-day job.
Yeah. It tracks with our experience in doing, because in addition to the podcast, we do this AI meetup that meets monthly or move into bi-monthly. And all of our early conversations were, AI is cool. You guys need to learn about this AI thing. And we said AI is cool for about a year. And then we got tired of saying it, and people got tired of hearing it because they're like, okay, shut up. We know about AI now. I'm probably more talking about our wives than anybody.
Yes.
And the conversation became, how can I apply it? And the session at Tech Week that you guys did was one of my favorites, if not my favorite.
Likewise.
Because it was literally hands-on, like you said. And for the audience, Doug talked about it at a high level, but literally what they provided was a couple pieces of software that I'd never heard of before. Learning Machines, I think, was one of them. I can't remember the exact name of it. And there were data sets of parts, almost kind of looked like disc brakes or something. I couldn't tell exactly what it was. And there were examples of a bunch of good ones, a couple hundred, if I remember right. And then there were examples of bad ones. And you uploaded a data set and you trained the model to recognize, like, this is what good parts look like. And then you said, this is what bad parts look like. And it only took a couple of minutes to do all that. It was super quick. Took a lot longer to collect those photos, I'm sure, than I did to upload them and do all that. And then you started feeding it pictures and saying, is this good or bad? And you start to think like, oh, I get this. I can see on an assembly line how much faster that would be and how much more reliable it would be than probably what the current method is. And so then you're starting to think about efficiency, and you can redirect the folks that were doing that to do things that humans are really good at versus, like, this is something that's perfect for a machine to do. A person has way other capabilities. They could be spending their time doing more fruitful things there. So I thought it was awesome.
I did too. And like you said, it hits that here's how to use it practically, here's like the hands-on, literally, I'm going to build it myself. I think it did that. And I also think it highlighted how critical good data is
Yes.
to do that, because you can't just go, oh, I'm going to build this this AI program, this workflow, well, what's the data coming from and how good is your data? What's the data hygiene looking like? And like you said, hundreds of pictures that probably took a long time to gather, and then hundreds of bad ones for it to learn on.
Yeah.
But that understanding that though actually helps you then identify and define a step that you're going to have to take in that implementation. Yeah. Okay, now I know that this is the process that I feel is broken. I'm going to have to make sure that I'm able to capture clean data. And what does that clean data look like? And suddenly it's much more tactical at that point, as opposed to, again, oh my gosh, this is this huge strategy that I have to implement everywhere. No, you're dealing with a particular line.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with a particular output. How do I get output data based on that? Using it, I mean, I'm going to go back just a second, using the analogy of these quality initiatives that are going on in plants ever since the 80s and 90s. Again, the timeliness of being able to identify something that has been thrown out of tolerance, for example, it's critical to be able to identify it quickly and react quickly. And a lot of times, even in plants that have gone through ISO certification and a bunch of quality improvement initiatives and everything else, oftentimes that out of tolerance condition isn't identified until the end of the shift or overnight. We're looking at this, and think about that. I mean, you have potentially 8 hours of runtime where you've been producing junk, honestly, that you can't sell because it's out of whack, but we're not doing those measurements frequently enough to be able to react and to stop and correct. The biggest benefit that we're starting to try to get these manufacturers to understand is with ongoing monitoring, with these automated data gathering tools and being able to analyze data on the fly right away, suddenly, conceivably, the best case scenario is the first piece that gets produced that's out of tolerance, you get to identify it right away and correct it right away. Or even in the future case, the machine may even be able to correct itself based on what it sees. So that's all down the road. That's all kind of sharing the oh my gosh, that will be a wonderful kumbaya moment for everybody. Where the machines are just, it's lights out manufacturing and it fixes itself. But there are steps that we have to take to be able to get there. And the first is just capturing the data.
Yeah.
I think that class like we took at the Tech Week, I think that also changes the mindset of not only what's possible, but how do I think differently in my company to then go, I can start identifying some of those needs and where this could be implemented. I think that's a huge one, because you might have one champion, one person, but the rest of the company's going, I just do my daily in and out and that's it. I'm not sure where this could apply. So trying to get everybody on that same page of let's think about this a little bit deeper of where could some of these things be automated, or where could AI be implemented? Not I know how to build the exact solution, but hey, this could be something. This is repetitive enough. This is coming off the machine. A lot of machine learning that's in there. You mentioned some of these, they're on legacy systems and they have because to get that data, you need sensors, you need cameras, how is that? Like, you go to a manufacturer that's been around for 80 years using equipment that's bulletproof, but it gets no data for you. Yeah. How is that being managed?
Well, it's a great question, because I'm walking into a company where it's a third generation machine shop, and the owner is pointing me out. Here's our newest piece of equipment. It's older than me, and
yes, exactly.
It's a great question, but the solution is actually surprisingly simple. And it's not going to necessarily find and capture all data that this machine could potentially put out. But there are solutions out there where it's super simple to go out and in fact, I've kind of spec'd some things out where you can buy 5 vibration sensors and literally mount them to the machine, identify my vibration points. These are essentially Bluetooth enabled that shoot data into a laptop that they might have in their production office, and with a connection to the right type of model that can actually be quickly trained about what's acceptable and what's not. I could spend maybe $2,000 and equip 4 or 5 machines with these little sensors that just capture vibration data. And with the proper training, which is super easy to get, it'll be trained up quite quickly on that set of data. suddenly I'm able to start predicting downtime, where I see vibrations suddenly take a spike, and the monitoring tool will raise a flag, and it will just say, okay, this machine is starting to get out of whack. It's time for us to plan to come down and actually start looking into this machine to see what's causing that problematic vibration. It's suddenly I'm able to, once I shift from reactive maintenance to predictive maintenance, suddenly there's savings on the page.
Oh yeah, going back to we just did an 8-hour shift and we're figuring it out versus this is going to happen in the next couple of minutes.
Right.
Shut it down. Let's fix it.
Exactly. Exactly. Because once, if something were to completely fail, suddenly fixing that failure expands significantly the amount of time that I'm down. Suddenly delivery time starts shifting, and there's an actual tangible cost to that. Being able to predict that, being able to make that fix while, the floor is dark. If I can fix it on second shift, suddenly I'm up and going the next morning, and everything's golden.
So you're able to retrofit.
Oh yeah,
equipment.
Absolutely, and and that type of MacGyver type solution like that is very common out there in the real world about how people take their first steps into identifying, quantifying, and using these machines to help monitor data.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, no, go ahead.
You had mentioned a little bit about identifying a champion on the floor and having one person be involved with that, and how sometimes they run into resistance with the rest of the company. We find that absolutely is a concern, and even more so when you start talking about automating things and you start talking about bringing technology in. A lot of times there's a lot of defensiveness among the workers themselves. Are we doing this to eliminate jobs?
Right.
And really what we're finding is that's not the case. That if there is an improvement in production efficiency, usually that goes toward producing more. And that's where the benefit to the company comes in, because suddenly I'm not constrained by my processes anymore, and I'm able to actually produce more because there's enough demand for my products out there that I can sell everything I make, essentially. So what we're finding, though, is that instead of replacing jobs, it's actually creating new jobs. In the case of robotics, for example, oftentimes if a process is automated through the use of robots, we need to have some people up there taking care of the robots and programming the robots and watching that production. The same is true with some of these processes that we're talking about with AI oversight, is we need somebody to be able to help make sure that we're positioning it properly. We need to essentially interact with the models that we're trying to train, and we're also then trying to find new opportunities within the plant. And suddenly a person may go from a $25 an hour job running the production unit up to a $35 or $40 an hour job running these types of things. They've definitely scaled up in their capabilities
with added skill sets.
Absolutely.
And, that can translate into other companies, and absolutely. It's more about embracing that change and evolving yourself higher. Definitely.
Right.
Definitely.
And in the case of, again, I go back to the quality improvement initiatives back in the 80s and 90s, when one of the biggest benefits that took place within companies that started to adopt this, and some of the attributes that they were trying to promote more, was just that curiosity. I wonder why, or I wonder how this could be better. How can we improve on this thing? Why is this production unit so slow? Why is this line? Why are we doing this 10 times a shift instead of having it be automated? That same type of curiosity is absolutely what we're trying to promote within this whole thing as well. Is how could we do it better? And if we monitor it more often. Yes, there's a lot of data coming in. It's probably impossible for a human to monitor this.
Right.
Yep.
So that's why we're implementing these models, is we can have a real-time view of exactly what's going on. And if I had that visibility, what would I do to improve it?
Yeah. And still going back to the champion, anytime I talk to somebody about AI strategy or workflows, I'm always asking, who is heading this up and how much buy-in do you have from leadership? Yeah. Because if it's one person fighting everyone else, we want to bring this in, and I'm trying to find outside people to back me up, it's such a different outlook, a different process than we want to do something. Leadership is tasking me with it, or I'm approaching leadership. We're in unison of we need to bring something on board. We don't know where to start. That's a whole different conversation.
It is, but it also underscores how important it is to have other resources that provide information.
Yeah.
Having CEOs talking to each other about what some of these changes are and how to implement. Suddenly, you have initiatives coming in from the top. You have initiatives coming from the floor itself, and in the middle is the people that'll actually start making the specific decisions about what to do and how. And if they're getting pressure from both sides, they're going to be more quick to make those types of decisions.
You said earlier, these small and medium businesses are hearing examples of enterprise AI applications with these larger manufacturers. And pretty much all we've talked about so far is at the machine level. Are there, and that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, that's what drives these manufacturers, but there's so many other areas where AI can impact a business. So are there conversations around HR, customer service, and those kinds of things?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, every dimension of these companies is having the same conversation, and an HR department may be having that conversation with the HR software vendor that they use, for example. There are tremendous opportunities in all aspects of the company, and that's another important consideration when we talk to these companies. Is it doesn't have to be dedicated solely to the production line. Any process that the company uses to do anything, manage their employees, purchase utilities, everything that they do has an opportunity to be optimized through the use of AI. And even if it doesn't involve implementing a technology myself as a company owner, I just want to make sure that the vendors that I'm using to do some of these services are considering using AI to improve what they're delivering to my employees as well. I mean, supply chain optimization is a huge issue, obviously, with tariffs and previously with COVID. Being able to be quick and reactive and identify different sources of materials that I'm going to be using and be able to make a very quick change. A lot of these logistics companies are using AI to actually turn on a dime and use my next best alternative and make that switch, essentially the blink of an eye.
Yeah, that's. I think that's where it can get really interesting. Because you can think about a machine that does the same thing all the time, and we're talking more about monitoring and predictive maintenance and things like that, quality control. But AI, its ability to help make decisions on the fly, I think is where you really start to see, because you could almost do some of the other stuff that we're talking about without AI, right? This monitoring and things like that. Aggregating the data, AI is great at that. Machines are great at that. But when it comes to things more like decision making, finance is another great one too, where you're seeing that data come in and help you make decisions based off of that too.
Without a doubt. And ultimately, I keep looking down the road about what this could potentially look like. Is that I see, in my nirvana of technology enabled production, I see a trend eventually going toward, instead of long automated production runs of the same equipment, same pieces coming out, day after day after day, shift after shift, I see a trend starting to come forward where it's going to be highly responsive, highly reactive production, where I'm essentially producing small runs, custom products, but I'm able to make those shifts almost automatically through the use of automation and through the use of AI optimization, where I'm able to react to an order that comes in that has some customized components to it, and I'm able to make that shift and get it into production immediately. And suddenly 2 weeks later, my customer has that customized product in their hands. AI is going to be critical to that type of optimization, that type of minimized switchover for that particular piess of equipment.
It's almost like a new definition of lean manufacturing.
Absolutely. And then, I nerd out on this all the time and read what could be, but I see, potentially even vendors, instead of selling a new 5-axis machine to manufacturers, they could be producing, essentially selling output, where essentially I'm the machine tool manufacturer, I'm going to place that machine on your floor, and I'm going to sell you hours of production, or whatever that service looks like. AI will allow me to remotely monitor how that machine is working and allows me to come in and optimize the production of that particular unit. I'm selling you time on that machine and output. Suddenly, the cost of me implement as a manufacturing company owner, the cost to me to get into that new piece of equipment is lower, because I'm not actually purchasing that piece of equipment. I don't have to take the loan out and essentially try to pay it off and amortize it over a period of time. I'm just paying. It's output as a service is what that's essentially is, where I'm able to use what I need. I don't have to worry about maintaining the equipment. You, as my vendor, is going to be doing that for me, and all I do is have to be able to make sure that I can sell stuff to keep that unit busy.
I freaking love that idea.
Interesting.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. It's obviously down the road some.
Yeah.
But I think that everything is going more towards, we talk about the gig economy, and I think that production and manufacturing potentially has an opportunity to head down that same path.
When you guys got me thinking about just AI and robotics and where those intersect, is I love to just research that and nerd out, to use your term, on that kind of stuff. And if you're doing that, and if I'm a company that's distributing these robots that are doing things for manufacturers, one of the cool things that if you think about Tesla's robot and these different humanoid type robots that are coming out, one of the promises there is if it learns how to do something, it's a hive mind. So then every robot now knows how to do that thing. It's kind of like plugging Neo into the Matrix and he learns Kung Fu, right?
Whoa.
Yeah. So, if you have those robots and you identify like, hey, there's an issue with this one that we sent to ABC Corporation. Once it's identified how to work around that using AI, it says, okay, I fixed this, and then it just sends that out to every other robot. Sure. that they're all connected, right? And they're all learning from the real world, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And then a company that's considering getting that same service from that same provider, suddenly they have access not only to the best equipment but the best practices as well.
Yeah.
So I know that I'm using the most efficient process that's out there right now based on the actual data.
Yeah. Yeah, even things that would make it just more efficient, or ways to self-maintain that it didn't know before, and things like that. Yeah.
Right. But again, I mean, obviously way down the path right there. But the first step is actually getting that data. That's the blood of this whole entire beast that we're talking about is finding ways of capturing that data, getting it in a meaningful form so that we can start analyzing it. Again, whether it literally is a person up in the back corner checking actual performance versus tolerance, or once we start getting that process down, using AI and other types of monitors to automate that process.
Well, then you're thinking, no, my mind's starting to go down this rabbit trail. So I've got this machine in my manufacturing run, and it's doing certain things for me. And I've got a new client that wants something that's different than that. And instead of like programming and sitting down and like trying to figure out all the measurements and everything, again, going back to Tesla and what they're doing with their Optimus robot, they're creating a digital world that their robots can exist in, so that they can learn things digitally and not have to learn them in the physical world. So now this vendor, and if I'm the manufacturer, I can just describe to this vendor what needs to be done. They can create a digital environment for that, and then we can start to build those specs digitally. Wow.
Well, I mean, it's the concept of a digital twin, where, I mean, again, ideally, a manufacturing company could potentially put all of their processes in a model. And if they're starting to potentially think about new plant layouts, new ways of doing things, new processes, they can actually test those out on what they call the digital twin, where you think about that movie Apollo 13. Yeah. Where the spacecraft had some damage, and they were trying to figure out ways to be able to reprogram some things within the machine itself or within the vehicle itself to be able to get it back to Earth. And there was a switchover that they had to make. They couldn't get above a certain electric output.
Yep.
They had a twin. They basically had that same mock-up, and they had one of the astronauts performing all these different tasks to see if it could be done without crossing that barrier. The same can be done digitally, where if I make this change to my plant, suddenly I can test it out on this digital twin to see what the benefit would be.
Yeah.
It may be theoretical, but it also is probably pretty close to being what you'll actually find in the real world. Testing things out, optimizing like that is so much cheaper than actually making those changes and having to pay the price if we didn't select the right model.
Right.
And spending days of output and measuring to make sure it's right versus that virtual environment.
Right. But that digital twin can then also, as you correctly identified, can be used to optimize the process of switching specific output specs, reacting to a new request coming in from a customer. And we can talk specifically about what it would take to make that change, but we can also essentially identify specific costs to that and to make sure that the pricing that we're charging that customer reflects the increased costs that we face. But those increased costs will be less because we're testing it out virtually as opposed to physically.
So talking about, we're talking a lot about what manufacturers can do, small, mid-size, large. Obviously, large manufacturers, or at least my assumption, large manufacturers they're going to have a lot more of the R&D money. They're going to have a lot more, I don't want to say strategic direction, but they have a lot more resources, if you will, to implement or try different things. If you start looking at those mid-size and the smaller manufacturers, how do they get into this? How do they start? Where you're wearing multiple hats already? How do they jump into that?
Yeah, well, I think maybe I'll describe the large case first a little bit more, just because it highlights how they're able to make those types of steps and investments and changes. Oftentimes, those large manufacturers, they have a dedicated IT and honestly OT staff that is dedicated specifically to all of our processes as a company. And that IT staff has got data flow coming in from all these different groups, purchasing and HR and everything else. So they're used to understanding data coming in from all these different sources, how we process that data. We understand what that data looks like, what we're capturing and how we're capturing it. So you have resources that understand how that enterprise works, where those data flows are coming from. And so I have a resource that I can go to reliably to say, okay, if we're trying to do this particular improvement, what data do I have? How do I get it? They're there and they're able to make that change, and they're able to tag which of these inputs is going to go into that process of fixing the thing I'm trying to improve. Small manufacturers, large manufacturers, or mid-sized manufacturers don't have that dedicated staff. So it's important to take the small steps first. Again, some of these enterprise-wide solutions, they may be prohibitive. It may be difficult for us to do anything as a small or mid-sized manufacturer for several years, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't just ignore the benefits that we get with some of these small bite-sized type of implementations. And so in those types of cases, the step would be, again, talk to the process owner who understands that particular process that's causing us fits, that's adding costs to our system, and talk to them about what they would need to have that process improved. And suddenly you start seeing a path towards improving that process. Maybe it's capturing data and monitoring it more often without the investment in sensors and monitors. If it's something we can just do physically, let's do that as a first step. Yeah. There's going to be some savings that we grind out because of that. Let's take those savings and maybe we can use that to fund acquisition of sensors and things like that. And it's very much a stepwise basis. But again, the first step in doing any of this is actually taking the first step. I mean, it's actually doing something to be able to at least start the conversation up and to identify what could be done. Another way of allowing or empowering companies to take that first step is by a free information exchange. If do I have somebody that does my same job in a different plant and they've already done it? How are they sharing that information among themselves? In a lot of cases, because it is such a it's difficult to define specifically what the ROI is on some of these things. You kind of have to do a little bit of a leap of faith. But if you can point to somebody that has done a similar type improvement and talk about what returns they got, it's a much easier conversation with the finance team to say, okay, there is a positive return on this. It appears like it'll pay for itself in 5 months. Maybe it'll take 6 months, but that's still a positive improvement.
Yeah.
I think where it can be weird in the beginning when you implement something like that. If we're not trying to replace people, which I'm not a fan of replacing people with AI. I'm a fan of, can the company do more with the people that they have because we've optimized with AI? You don't see an initial return on that investment because you're still paying the people that you were paying before. So your costs remain the same. But if you're able to bring in more revenue at a larger margin, you start to see that. So it does take time to recoup that. Mm-hmm. Or in certain areas, maybe somebody retires and you don't have to replace that person, right? Like not selecting somebody out, but they self-select out. Maybe that's a path for that too. So it's just, I had lunch with a friend this week. And he's like, oh, that makes a lot more sense because he was not in manufacturing. He's in healthcare, but he was trying to figure out, he said, I know that we can't do nothing with AI, but I also know that there's all these tools out here and there's so many tools, kind of like what we were talking about before. There's so many options out there. They can be very expensive and, but his use case is somewhere in between the do nothing and the buy something. So, and you talked about neutral parties. This is not a neutral party when it comes to AI. Our companies have AI offerings and want to be very upfront with that. But there is a middle ground where solutions can be custom built and they don't have to be prohibitively expensive.
Right.
They can be tailored to a small niche. So if you want to dip a toe into it, you can say, hey, I have this one repetitive workflow. Can we just attack that one first? And not only do you get a chance to, work with a new vendor that maybe you haven't worked with before, see how they operate, get a feel for, that whole process of measuring what the workflow was doing before, mapping the process and having something to compare to, as an outcome to see if you improve that process. But you're also not taking it this huge leap. And I just want to throw that out there too, that there are affordable middle options for companies that just want to try to give something a try around that. And you guys do a lot of that at Midstream.
It's the same thing that there's a lot we can build and it doesn't have to all be, like you said, you just take the one step. Let's just talk about the workflow and where your data is. And I know you do a lot of this. What's the strategy? Let's just start talking about strategy before we implement anything. And just, how do you eat a mountain or whatever it is with a spoonful at a time? I don't know what the analogy is.
Step at a time.
I don't know why you'd eat a mountain. But.
No, exactly right. And again, oftentimes there are groups, there are resources like this podcast to be able to identify potential steps and people that can help, where I can go for more information. One of the things that my group does when we walk a plant floor too is this is a question we ask regardless of what type of process improvement probably needs to take place. But we sit there with the people that are running the machine or the production manager or the operations manager. If this machine wasn't going down all the time, what else would that person be doing? What could this equipment be doing if it wasn't going down on an unplanned basis? And suddenly, when they answer that question, you suddenly have the performance metric that you have for measuring whether or not you're bringing benefit to the organization. Yeah. We would be producing X amount more. We could handle one more new product that we'd be kicking out. We could cut down on our emergency shipping times or emergency shipping costs by X amount.
Be a lot less swearing.
Yeah, well, some view that as a positive, some as a negative. So
maybe not.
But honestly, the people that understand that are intimately involved with that process now, usually they know what could be done. They know generally what type of improvements that they would be looking for. In some cases, they're just looking for the justification to make those types of improvements. And in many cases, increased monitoring, being able to identify more quickly things going out of spec, things going out of whack, provides that economic reason for making the change that they've been advocating for a period of time.
You said earlier in the recording that this is kind of what manufacturers are experiencing now is similar to the implementation of quality control. I think you said back in the 80s. Are there lessons learned from that can be applied today? If somebody's listening, it's like, yeah, I went through that. I remember what that was like. Oh yeah, this is what we did. And instead in just reducing the fear, and this is a lot of what you've been talking about today, which I love, is take this big hairy monster. Sorry about that. Big hairy monster, and reduce it down, and eat that mountain.
Eat that mountain.
So, are there things that could be that were learned from that can be applied to what folks are doing today with AI?
Absolutely, absolutely, there is. If you take a look at those early adopters of the quality improvement initiative, that type of environment that was out there, you had some people that had to make that type of change. Harley Davidson was in the process of going out of business. So they were absolutely pushed to be able to make that type of change. So they glommed onto the first, I shouldn't say the first, but they glommed onto a very early adopter of implementing quality improvement initiatives. They learned a lot from Toyota and a lot of the production philosophies that were coming in from Japan at the time. And they implemented it and it actually worked. But again, they then provided some of the proof points that other large companies were using to adopt these type of broad enterprise-wide type solutions. As those got implemented, there became a data set of ROIs that were generated with these types of initiatives. And then once you started getting real data, then you can optimize that process of training and implementing quality improvement initiatives with some greater degree of certainty that if I'm a company that's been thinking about it, been waiting for these initial companies to try these solutions and break them and see where they fail, I'll come in as a secondary adopter and I'll build on that knowledge base. That very likely is also the case in the case of AI implementation, where larger companies are able to make that initial foray in. They've been pretty guarded with their information about what some of that benefit is, and I totally understand why. But the actual processes themselves, the actual initiatives of going in and what processes we're using AI to improve, that knowledge is leaking out. And the biggest lesson that was learned was that if you're going to implement this system-wide within your company in a broad-based, there's a great lesson learned from GE, for example, with Six Sigma. You throw everything you got at it. You make it a corporate initiative. You have policies and strategies and work plans around it. And you build up a team internally to be able to make sure it touches every system that you have. That's one lesson learned if you're a big behemoth. The other lesson learned by some of the smaller players is that there are absolute benefits that you can do by quick implementations of small projects on a step-by-step basis. And that process itself, they're not going to be perfect solutions. You can't wait around for a perfect solution, but by taking those steps and making a reasonable attempt to improve processes using technology in some cases, maybe not, there are benefits to the business that you have to take in order to be able to even compete going forward. And those that take those initial steps, suddenly they start building that fluency. They start becoming an expert in these particular types of changes that allows them to bring more to the table. Suddenly they feel a little bit more confident. Those CEOs feel a little bit more confident talking about the initiatives that they've been doing within their facilities. And as they're willing to take that risk, they're going to start getting more information coming back from other earlier adopters as well.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for recapping that. I mean, it's tough to feel like you have to learn the same lessons over and over again, right? So you can just go back to what worked before.
Well, and when you're my age, I mean, that's all you do is you sit around in your rocking chair. And, way back then.
Yeah.
When I was on my BlackBerry. Yeah.
So what are, I guess as we get towards the end here, one thing I wanted to bring up was, what are the risks that you're seeing out there of people? I want to kind of see both ends of it, of not trying to look at AI for anything, or at least seeing where the threat is. What are the risks of not implementing or looking at AI programs versus we are looking at it and there's risks here? What are some of those risks that people are seeing?
Sure. So I think that the risk of inaction is the same risk that any company has in trying to not look at its own processes. I mean, suddenly they're going to find themselves significantly outperformed by somebody in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And so the risk of burying one's head in the sand is that competitors will just eat your lunch. And that is true of any type of process improvement, regardless of whether AI is included in that initiative or not. And I think that a way of trying to get around that risk is to get people to understand that their initiatives shouldn't be solely to implement AI. It should be to improve processes and improve their company. So, I mean, if we make sure that we drill that message into the minds of these decision makers, that's that type of continually questioning your processes and always trying to make sure that you've got solutions that work going forward. That's the only way companies will stay alive. I mean, companies are like sharks in that manner. You got to keep moving. You can't rest on the processes that have been in place as long as some of these pieces of equipment have been there. The risk that some of these other companies are facing by jumping in and doing things too fast is that there is a huge cost of entry. If it's a broader implementation, there's a huge cost of entry. Yep. Capturing all this data. In some cases, buying new equipment because it's able to capture by itself a lot of the data streams that we're looking for. That's a big investment. So the risk is that investment going to pay out? Are we going to implement this properly enough to take advantage of all of this? One way of mitigating that risk is to, again, try to piece it up so it's not a huge enterprise decision from day one.
Yeah.
Also, seeking other sources of support to help lower that cost of entry is also really important. We're connected to the MEDC and Automation Alley, for example, and there has just, over the course of the last 3 years, there's been an initiative by the state of Michigan called Industry 4.0, where my group goes out and assesses the adoption of technology within a lot of these smaller manufacturers, identifies where there might be some benefits to the company for making technology investments.
Yeah.
It could be AI, it could be systems integrations, it could be robotics, it could be a lot of different types of technology. And the state of Michigan had a grant to be able to essentially match funds for an initial investment into some of these types of technologies. That project or that program has been sunsetted with this at the end of this fiscal year. We know that there's something that they have planned to carry that torch a little bit further. Yeah. We heard this morning that the state has come to an agreement about what its budget is, but we haven't seen those details, so we don't know we don't know how much or what that program is and if it's funded. We have our fingers crossed. But the state has provided resources traditionally to be able to help manufacturers make some of those initial investments, not to take over the entire payment, but certainly to work with the manufacturers to lower that cost of entry. So again, the way of mitigating the risk of trying to take on too much is by scaling down some of those initial implementations. And then, once you start getting some of the financial benefits that we're quite certain will come with those initial investments, you start to use that return, that financial return, to fund the next steps that you have towards implementing a broader scope.
Nice. That'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. That really will.
I think it's exciting. You got me more excited about manufacturing just sitting here in this last hour. It's when you don't think about it all the time, and I know you do because it's your job to do that. It's always fun to talk to someone who's like really into what they do, and your energy around this. We do a pre-call for the listeners. And it was about 30 seconds in. We're like, yeah, we're going to have Doug on the podcast.
You've got to join us.
The Right Place is lucky to have you and someone who's so excited about this and understands the technology and wants people to do well. It's very evident in how you talk about it.
Well, I'm going to attach the transcript of this to my performance review, and this is awesome. Yeah.
Well, Doug, appreciate having you on. It was great talking with you on this. Tell our listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, we the easiest way to find us is you can go to the rightplace.org, first of all, and look for manufacturing solutions. You can find us that way. We're also at thecenterwest.org. Again, most of the initiatives that I talked about were specifically operating under the guise of the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center.
Sure.
Again, it's the state and federal government are funding these initiatives to be able to provide more information and more resources. And one last little pitch with regards to the Right Place as well. We have the Manufacturers Council, we have Tech Council, we have Medical Device Manufacturing Council, and we have Supply Chain Councils. In the past, each of these different councils, they're made up by individual companies, and they're dedicating their time to making sure that they raise the level of competence in each of their segments. They had been operating a little bit under silos. But again, because of what we're talking about, especially with AI, that touches everybody. That touches all industries. It touches all those segments of those councils. So we're seeing a lot of cross-pollination going on between our councils as well. And these lessons that we've learned and the AI roadmap that the Right Place has put out to help companies identify those initial paths and how to do some of these step-by-step implementations. Those lessons are being pushed out through each of those different councils as well, and we're working together on a lot more.
Awesome. Sharing that knowledge,
right. And again, then with leaders in this subject matter coming together and acknowledging that understanding and information in this area is critical for the entire region to be able to benefit. Appreciate the investments that you all are making in the community as well by having the podcast and the other initiatives that you're all working in, because an informed set of business owners that's the absolute fundamental base on which any of these improvements is going to be.
That's why we're doing it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks a lot, Doug. Appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on. If you like today's episode, please like and subscribe below. Thanks, everybody.
Even if you didn't like it, still like and subscribe.
Or leave a comment.